Okay, so okay, so here we are again, and I'm going to share my screen with you to talk about this next thing. So this was supposed to be the U.S. Refugee Admission Program, and it's specifically highlighting Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Ohio. I'm gonna tell you, as an English professor, and we all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. But boy, oh boy, it just gets on my nerves when I see grammatical errors. But I'm going to move past it and we're going to focus on the justification here is that they're saying that we have too many refugees. So this is a different than a person who is an immigrant. Let me pause you here and start with saying, what is a refugee? A refugee is a person who comes from a country that is experiencing turmoil. Now, there's a number of there are ramifications of what does it mean to come from turmoil. You can't just come across, and people do, and say they feel unsafe. Now, feeling unsafe in your community is not enough. So I know many of you argue, and rightfully so, that there are places in Mexico that are extremely dangerous, and there are, and we're not going to lie about that. However, that does not meet the standard of a person coming from Mexico to come to the United States as a refugee. Usually, to meet the standard, you had to be your country has to be completely in upheaval, meaning that there's a large civil war to the point that uh, there's no stable government. There's a genocide taking place. Like when I'm saying it has to be a huge level, or, and we do have some of these, where someone is a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and that community is being threatened with being annihilated. And so we do have those. Okay. So that's what a refugee and what we do is when that person has to stay. First of all, let me tell you this. A person who is a refugee cannot just walk up to the United States border and come in. No, no, no. They have to apply and they have to stay in their said country until they receive, um, you know, some type of solace. Now, it could be that they cannot stay in their said country. So, what ends up happening is they can go to the UN. They can stay in a UN facility. There are some other places, maybe they may stay refuge in another country, which happens quite a bit. I've actually known some students who have to have stayed in another country and then they receive the paperwork from the United States saying that they can actually come. Uh, and how long does this take? Mm, it can depend. I'm gonna tell you that it takes, for some people, it can take as little as a year. For others, it can take years, years, which is why many of these people have left their country and have gone to another country that's a little bit more stable than theirs, or they may reside in a UN refuge facility for years. If you stay there for 1 year, that is amazing. And I've actually had a student who stayed in the UN facility. Um, and sadly enough, they took this person's money and and gave them fake documents. So they were trapped in another country for a while, for 3.5 months before they can make it to another country where while they sat and waited for the application and they sat there for another year and a half. So, needless to say, a refugee coming to the United States, this is not an easy process at all. However, there are some countries that we gave solace to. Let me stop this screen because I need to take you back to Cuba. So let me take you to Cuba refugee. Uh-huh. Mm, of 1966. Mhm. Cuban Act of 1966. Why does this matter? Okay. Lyndon B. Johnson, November 2nd of 1966, granted a sense of asylum. It grew from 79,000 to 439,000 people in 1 decade. You got to remember, why did this happen? Well, Cuba and the United States had great relationships with each other. Then they had a bit of Cuba had a bit of a rebellion led by Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro said, "Hey, United States, you got to get up out of here because you're exploiting us. You're turning us into a colony for your sugar, with all these sugar plantations. And sugar plantations is the framework of how we get, and it's also rum. And it also became a place of a destination spot. People are coming here to vacation. It's becoming like another spot for Americans, and we're not trying to become a colony. Granted, I'm not going to make a statement there. So Fidel Castro, well, no, get out. Americans' businesses had to leave. And this led to a number of Cubans making the decision to leave. And Fidel Castro became more in alignment with more socialist policies. Um, and these socialist policies, and also he aligned himself with Russia, and well, sorry, USSR. And we now had Kennedy in 1961 made the decision to have this undercover secret mission, which is how we got the Bay of Pigs, which was essentially a play to overthrow the government of Fidel Castro. By the way, I know that Kennedy gets praise, but if you really dig into into the Bay of Pigs, I think you would probably have more mixed results because what the United States did is that they used Cubans, they gave weapons to Cubans to kind of overthrow the government. It Fidel Castro and his folks found out and met them at the beach where they landed, and the CIA bounced and left these people there. Um, and yeah, um, and didn't back them, and so it became a bit of a kerfuffle. It did lead to our Cuban Missile Crisis, which again, Kennedy gets praised for because we were on the brink of a nuclear war. Whatever. I mean, this is not really here to, we're not, this is not a negative read on anybody, but Lyndon B. Johnson made the decision to give kind of like this cover for Cubans. And um, this left a lot of Cubans who decided to leave. In 1980, Cubans really began to leave in droves. And then it led to, which is here, President Clinton gave this suggestion. August of 1995, the Clinton administration gave this wet foot, dry foot policy, which was responding to Fidel Castro saying that no Cuban could leave to go to the United States, right? So what does this mean? It meant that if you were a Cuban and you were in whatever life craft, if you were in the ocean, I'm gonna stop share. You're in the ocean, then and the Coast Guard caught you in the ocean. They were going to be able to take you and turn you around and you got to go back to Cuba. But if you made it to the shore of Florida with two dry feet, I mean, that means not at, you can't be in the ocean standing. You had to be on the beach with no water around you. I know this sounds really ridiculous, but if you were in the ocean standing and like what the tide comes in and the Coast Guard catches you, they'd send you back. So you better run up. And so you saw people coming to the United States on anything, rafters, doors, donuts, the little donuts, whatever. So you're seeing people leave this way. Okay. President Obama eventually passes. He's the first president to actually meet with the Castro, and he lifts the travel embargo. This is a very controversial decision. We had when Obama left office, um, Trump reversed this decision. So, which was something that also had mixed results in Cuba. I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people, when I teach this aspect of this in political science, and I talk about Cuban voters, I ask the question, why did America have a travel embargo? And literally, most of the time, nobody has any clue what we're talking about. So the notion of communism, socialism, I know that people like to throw these words around and people think that most people care. I don't believe it. Maybe I'm biased, but I really don't believe it. And 99% of the time, most people don't even know what the words mean. They know that they just throw around communism and socialism as if they're synonymous with each other, and they're not. And then we start talking about, well, the United States does have socialist policies, and they're like, no, they don't. No, we don't. I'm like, it's called police. Police is a socialist policy. But you know what? To each his own. I don't care. That's not what we're here for again. We're back here with um um here we are when it comes to this conversation of what do we do? Okay, so are we about to trade with Cuba? Mm, Obama said we could. So people started visiting Cuba. Anyway, let's get back. Hmm. So we're talking about now this refugee policy. So what they're saying here is that we are now Section 2. We're only to admit those refugees who can fully and appropriately assimilate into the United States and to ensure that the United States preserves taxpayer resources for its citizens. What does that even mean? But we're also looking at where it says, I therefore direct, okay, Section 3, that entry into the United States of refugees under USRAP be suspended. And it will be suspended starting January 27th, 2025. For those of you who are unfamiliar with USARP, let's look at what this is. Okay. Um, like I okay, let me go back. So, um, okay. So essentially, we're looking at who is actually receiving, all of these partners, but who is actually are the priority. And they're arguing that it's the certain um, groups, but they're also looking at people who, are referred to by private sponsors, looking at the family reunification. So if you have a family member here, then you are much more likely to get somebody to be able to come here. And really, that stems from what happened during World War II with the Jewish population and the groups of humanitarian concern that's identified by the U.S. Refugee Program. So here we go with who are the people of humanitarian concern, right? And this is where we get Afghan, for example, we're getting the Haitian group, we're getting Cubans, and we're getting, Filipinos. The Filipino, okay, that is of concern. But what we're really are looking at is Cubans. And this is where it gets really, really sticky, icky, icky. because what they're saying at this point in time, that all of these groups, the Afghan, the Haitian, Filipino, the reason why I side with this a little bit, no, I'm not saying I side with anything, but the reason why I'm kind of like, is because the number of Filipinos when it comes to World War II, this kind of veteran parole program, is very, very small. Very, 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 very small at this point. The two larger groups is going to be your Afghan, Haitian, and Cubans. And I'm going to say that the Afghan population is really on the slower side. We've been doing a lot more, which is the reason why people are arguing that this bill is specifically targeting Venezuelans, Haitians, and Cubans. So if you're looking online and you're like, people are continuously posting that this is going to hurt, that this is targeting Venezuelans, Cubans, and Haitians, it's because they're at the top of the list for when it comes to humanitarian effort. The United States has targeted, when I say the United States, I'm simply saying the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services has specifically targeted, um, not just them, but I mean, certain organizations too. Department of Homeland Security has specifically looked at these particular groups and saying that these are the most vulnerable people. And since they're so vulnerable, we need to specifically target them, um, and help them come over here because, uh, you know, we have a responsibility to these individuals. Well, good luck at this point, because what does this mean? What does the language mean? Well, the language of this is that starting on, and let me get the dates right. I don't want you to, um, starting on the 27th, which is, well, it's the 21st now, but 6 days from now. So starting 6 days from now, individuals who declare themselves a refugee are going to be reevaluated, based on their ability to assimilate. That is a hefty word because really what they're, how can you assimilate? Is it a certain look? Is it a language? Like, I can't answer that at this point. I really can't answer that for you. Um, Partly because they don't give a specific answer. They do not stipulate in our language here that what does it mean to assimilate and appropriately assimilate into the United States. And they are not even here to assimilate. So, I mean, it's a very vague word. It's a very vague word. I can't answer this. But at this point in time, if you are a person who applied for a refugee status, it is going to be on hold. Um, and that's what that means. And it's going to be suspended. And by the 27th, so 6 days from now, it will be suspended. They're not going to make any decisions on any applications. There will be a case by case basis And at this point, who's going to make the decision on a case by case is the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security are going to admit, I'm going to, so that you won't think that I'm not reading it correctly. The Secretary of State and the Secretary of Homeland Security may jointly determine to admit aliens to the United States as refugees on a case by case basis in their discretion. What does that mean? It is completely and utterly up to them. And it says may. May means may not. It's optional. And and they said that these such aliens as refugees is in the national interest and does not pose a threat to the security or welfare of the United States. What does that mean? I can't help you. I cannot help you on what that standard may mean. I do not know what that standard means. But it also says, this is the kicker. This is the thing that people are most upset about what the language is. Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Attorney General, shall examine existing law to determine the extent to which, consistent with applicable law, state and local jurisdictions may have greater involvement in the process of determining the placement or resettlement of refugees in their in their jurisdiction. What does this mean? It means that they can absolutely uproot any refugee and place them anywhere. So if you are a refugee in a location, you absolutely can be removed. And what can you be placed? Anywhere, a designated location. Okay, so now I may have got your attention. So, what is a designated location? A camp. And if you say that they can't do this, well, see, that Karamatsu case says that you can. Because if you notice anything in here, it does not specifically target one particular person, demographic. It specifically opens the door for refugee. So whoever the refugee can be. Now, if you want to make an argument that after they put these people in camps, that we notice that all the people are of a particular one demographic, now you may have a lawsuit. Now you may have a case. But what it's saying is if you are currently a refugee, you can be removed and placed anywhere. And in fact, it does not specifically state or it states in their jurisdiction. So they can't remove you out of the state, but they absolutely can place you in localities. So I can come knocking at your house, put you into designated location centers. It gives you this right to do so. And it also can hear Section 5, revocation. You, refugee, can be returned back to your country of origin. So after you are placed in a location, and what would make sense is if you were removed from your location, placed in whatever location you're going to be placed in, and then you have your Secretary of State, the Attorney General review what's happened. Do you have the right to stay? And if you do not have the right to stay, then it will be revoked and you will be then removed from the United States. It seems like how this is going to go. By the way, if you're unfamiliar, tonight, Mark Rubio was confirmed by the Senate 99-0. So as of right now, we do have a Secretary of State, and that is former Senator of Florida, Mark Rubio, who happens to be a Cuban. It's kind of interesting that Ted Cruz hasn't been nominated for anything, but Mark Rubio, who clearly still believes that he's going to be running for president one day, has been appointed as our new Secretary of State. So we shall see how he is going to handle this new found power of his in determining if refugees specifically will be able to stay, as he is going to be in a really interested predicament. Will he then get rid of all Cubans who are considered refugees? Fascinating, right? I'm sure this will be a point of contention for him when he makes a decision to run for president in the near future. And also, we shall see how he survives Secretary of State. I'm hoping for him that he survives it a bit longer, being that he left his seat in the Senate. With that being said, have a great night. And I think I'm gonna call it a night. It's almost 1 o'clock. So I'll come back. I think it's necessity to talk about the fact that we are no longer a part of mm, the World Health Organization. That's a biggie. We absolutely need to come back and talk about that. And with that, I bid you adieu.